What is going on, Comic Fam? It's your boy, the Bearded Comic Bro, and I am joined by comic creator Jason Douglas. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Friend, thank you for having me here. This is a delight.
I'm excited. We first met I say years ago, a while ago, back at Baltimore Comic Con, when you were there with
100
your
years ago at
you know
Baltimore Comic Con.
with your Ringo nominated book Parallel, and it's so good. But then we've been talking online for a long time. And
Yeah,
last year, I think it was last year, you had a Kickstarter with Jane American,
I
was
did.
a one shot. You got a new Kickstarter that's live at the time that we're talking about this. So if you guys like it, go check it out. But before we hop into the Kickstarter and stuff, I want to know, did you always grow up like reading comics, liking comics, or was this kind of something later in life?
The answer to all those questions is yes, even though it sounds like I'm about to contradict myself, but check it out. So like the short version, and there are no short versions with me, is this. I came to comics late, but still as a kid. Okay. I did not have older siblings. I did not have cool parents. I had nobody like down the street who was like, check this out. So I came being the oldest of the kids, having parents that were decidedly not influencing me pop culture wise, right? Like the apocryphal story, though I totally believe it's true, is my mom had free tickets in 1965 to see the Beatles at Olympia Stadium in Detroit, and she stayed home to do her hair instead, a very mid 60s thing. So like I don't have that. So I didn't actually be like dive really deep into comics until I was probably about 12.
Okay.
But I'm also one of those kind of people who it's like there is no portion control with me. There is no middle ground. So once I was in, it was give me all of it, right? So like my pull list, when I'm riding my bike up to the local comic shop from the age of like 12 to 15 was insane. Every single vintage Valiant book, like just like so I was heavy in.
Yeah.
And during that time, as I'm reading what I'm reading, you're very typical. Like I subscribed through Marvel, I subscribed to Spider-Man and What If, I think I had a subscription to. My first Carnage, first appearance of Carnage came in the mail, conveniently folded in half,
You got that beautiful
like
crease.
those kind of horror stories. I may or may not have traded um a New Mutants 98 for a New Mutants 95 because some guy in a weird red suit and you couldn't really see his feet was nowhere as cool as Wolverine jumping at Cable on the cover of 95. Those kind of mistake horror stories of a kid collector. But like, I was reading that typical stuff. And then I was very strangely also really in at a young age to Sandman Mystery Theater, and then all the Valiant books. That was the shared universe that I loved the most. And I did that very typical thing of kind of stepping away from comics for like I think it was like 9 years, somewhere in my mid late teens, and didn't come back into shops until like my mid 20s or something like that. And then I've been hooked ever since. But somewhere in there, in those early years, there's that God, I would love to do this. Wouldn't it be cool to
Yeah.
like participate in this, to write something, to make something? But very much well, you read Parallel, very much that idea of a dream deferred, right? It's very easy to put that on a back burner. In my case, to kind of take away the contradiction that I said earlier, yeah, I got into it really late in life. Like I didn't write my first book until I was over 40. And not because some light went off when I turned 40, like I like comics now. No, the dream had been there since I was probably 12. But like with things in life, it's always easier to do nothing than something.
Yeah.
It's always easy to push it off till tomorrow. And sometimes that's like an active avoidance. And sometimes that's just like time passes, man. Like life happens. And in my case, it was kind of like, again, a similar theme to what I wrote about in Parallel, like that existential dread about time passing and dreams deferred and you making choices that if you regret them or not, maybe it's too late to come back.
Right.
And one summer I was just like, enough is enough. I was writing a one-act play per year. My day job as a public school teacher for the last 25 years. And I was like running these drama clubs for elementary school and then middle school. And I was writing a one-act play a year, putting it on, got a couple of them like published. And then I'm like, I love this, but like the dream has always been comics.
Yeah.
So like one summer I just sat down and said, how hard could it be? blissful ignorance, right? Like way harder than than stage plays. Honestly, like it's a bigger beast. It's a different animal. But I just sat down and like wrote that first half of Parallel, and then chopped it, and then that really really unlikely story from a couple of years ago of getting that published, and then the sellout and the Ringo nominations and the award show and Where I Met You, and I've just been loving it and working it and experiencing all this cool comic creator stuff for the first time, but at a much more seasoned age where maybe I'm appreciating it at a kind of magical level because here I'm in middle age, like getting to do all these things that I dreamed about as a kid with the same enthusiasm as 12 to 15-year-old me, but like knowing and savoring it in a way that only somebody who's been an adult for a couple of decades can do, I think.
Yeah. It's so fantastic, like you said, of, you're just like, why not? Like, why not give it a try? And I think that's a lot like, whatever you're doing, like, I was like, I'm gonna do a YouTube show. Why not? Like, why? Like, just try something.
Right. Like it's so the advice that like I give people when they ask, right? Because whatever level of creative person you are, right? And even though inside your own head you're just you and you're no different than you were the day before, when you have that public footprint, like your show, my book, whatever, when somebody interacts with you, you hold this place the same way that all of our media heroes hold a certain place in our heads, right? Like the people you grew up on, the people that you admire. And so they look at you with you have this slight bit of otherness to other people if they haven't followed their dream yet, if they haven't stepped into the theater that you're in, that they maybe are hoping for. And obviously, like the most popular question, if they've got that desire, if they've got that dream, is like, how do you do it? Right? Like, how do what's the first step? What do I need to do? They want that piece of advice. And the thing that I tell everybody is basically kind of like a version of what Neil Gaiman told me years ago when I met him and got to spend some time with him because my elementary school students were writing him letters because of a book that they liked, and he was really nice to spend some time and send us some stuff and then hang out. And he had like teacher questions for me, which was mind blowing. Anyway, his point and my point is the best piece of advice is make your thing, do your thing. And it sounds trite when you say it first, but it's not, because the point is this: I can't promise you what'll happen
Right.
when you take your risk, when you follow your dream, when you make your thing. I can't promise you if it'll be good. I can't promise you if it will succeed in whatever definition you've got. I can't promise you that it will be published or have an audience of millions or whatever. But what I can promise you 100% is that if you don't do it, nothing will happen.
Yep.
Guaranteed. Guaranteed nothing happens if you don't do it.
Yeah.
Okay. And once you make your thing, once you do your thing, once you start your show, once you write your script, once you make your piece of art, it now exists in the world, and that cannot be taken away, number one. And now it has an infinite potential that it didn't have before. Because whether it's good or not, whether it's made for success on day one or not, it's now this workable, manageable thing that can be crafted and pushed harder, or maybe just use as a stepping stone to make your next thing.
Yeah.
You got to do it.
You've got to just take the step, and like, that's the best advice, because if you don't start, you aren't going to be able to build off of it. You're not going to be able to grow. You're not going to see what you need to do to make exchange,
I found that to be like the best advice, because like we could get into hyper specifics about, do this bit of minutia first and do this bit of minutia second, and that might be useful to some people or one person or whatever, but like we're also only talking about our own personal experience. Like I can tell you how I did it, I can tell you what happened to me, but that doesn't guarantee that if you follow that step by step you get to that same spot either. Whereas do it without the specifics is the universal best advice.
Yeah. And because if your passion's there, it just navigates, right? Like, that's what I did with my YouTube show. I was like, I started one of my most popular things was I used to do unboxing videos. People watch all the time. I'm like, I don't like this though. I don't want to keep doing it. So I stopped. Not a great advice. Like if you're trying to grow a channel, like your most popular thing, just stop it. I'm like, I want to talk to people about comics and how they make it. And that's, and so it's just is finding what you're passionate about and just trying it and figuring it out.
Right, because
So,
if it starts out as a dream or whatever, if it turns into a job and using job as a pejorative, like what are we doing?
right. Yeah. So you now have your dream. You did parallel. You did the one shot with Jane American, and now you have a Kickstarter out. The let's talk. Like, come on. Like, let if people have not gotten to check out the one shot, what is this universe that you've created with Jane American?
So this is a new book. It's a 132 page graphic novel. It's Jane's continuing adventures. For those of you, I'm going to tell you this. This is a little bit of something that I think you might be the first person I'm like really talking to about this. For people who have the one shot in their hands and are fans of the one shot. So the story stuff in there. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. There was this cover too. The
Oh, that's such
Rosie
a good cover.
the foil because I was a 90s nerd, right? The Cena Grace. We need Toucho Vision because this is the one that we put the soft touch laminate so it looks old and feels old.
Uh,
Anyway, so those 32 pages, at least the story being told in those 32 pages, is in the big book, but it's not a rehash. Art completely redone, and it's a different order, so it reads completely different. Like the big reveal at the end of the one
yep.
shot.
Yep.
It's like page 10. It just happens, it's out of the way, and then the tension starts to build from there. Like I wanted to keep those beats of the story about dad not coming home from the war and mom not being allowed to be a Rose of the River anymore, and that kind of stuff still to be in there. But we redrew it. Annie Wright, my artist, 22-year-old from Muncie, Indiana, like her skill level has grown exponentially. So it's like this gorgeous art, even compared to what was pretty stunning art in the one shot.
Yeah.
And then the storytelling, it's like, I don't want to say we Pulp Fictioned it, but like it goes in a different sequence. So it reads brand new anyway. And then you then on top of that have more than 100 pages of new content with the continuing adventures. But story-wise, premise. So we're talking about a World War II coming of age tale. It takes place in this small town called Plymouth, Michigan, where my family has grown up for generations. Okay. And premise-wise, we're talking about the 1940s where Jane is kind of living a life, a family of stability and hope until she's not. Until war brings tragedy to her doorstep and changes her in some pretty unbelievable ways, right? Insert coded language here for she can now do things that other people can't, okay? We're not going to say superheroes because they don't exist in this world, but she can now do things that might put her in that class.
Right.
But the end of the war has brought these economic realities home. Like I said, dad's not coming home. Mom has been kicked out of the factory because that's what we did at the end of the war, right? And it's kind of left Jane with this choice. She can stay safe, she can stay hidden, or she can embrace who she really is and know what she can truly do for the sake of everybody that she loves. Okay. Now, this book is full of those universal, relatable themes about identity, about self-worth, about self-fulfillment, about superpowers, okay? The things that everybody goes through always as a kid, and then even when we're growing into ourselves as an adult, whether we're late bloomers or just figuring out who we are even later on. These are things that we all do, but it's also a deeply, deeply personal story to me because it is named after and inspired by my late grandmother, who went through all that same stuff 80 years ago, right?
Yeah.
Had to make that decision after the war about who she was going to be once the men came home and she wasn't allowed or wasn't supposed to anymore, right? It is dedicated to all the kids who have gone through my classrooms over the last 25 years who still struggle with identity issues today, even though it's 21st century. We should have put a lot of that behind us. And it's also, and this is the part where I got to be careful because sometimes I get emotional when I talk about this. It's also very much dedicated to my late grandfather because just last year, at the age of 99, when he realized he wasn't going to make it to 100, and boy, did that make that man upset. He really wanted 100. So he's a World War II vet. And
Yeah.
when he knew he wasn't going to see 100, he was really, really part of the research process for this book. Maybe we'll get into this later, but like this is meticulously researched, not just because I'm a history nerd and I'm a bit pedantic myself, but like one of the philosophies about me as a writer that I think I've discovered over the last few years is if I'm going to ask you to suspend your disbelief on anything, parallel the other Landon reaching out, offering you a second chance, here, a young protagonist who can do things that other people can't, right? If I'm going to ask you to suspend your disbelief on that, I'm not leaving anything else in the unrealistic realm, right? Like all that medical lingo and jargon in parallel was researched through doctors and psychologists and the police and like all that stuff because I wanted to be real. Same thing here. You are not spotting a fridge slash ice box that is out of date for the year that it's taking place in, right? Like that kind of thing. And my grandfather was really involved in that research process. The factory, the real life factory that actually his father-in-law worked in World War II is extensively one of the main settings of this book. Like we found it the week before they tore it down and took a tour. He helped me with language. He was there. He got to see the one-shot covers and some of the pages before he passed. And he made me promise him that the book that contains the name and likeness of his high school sweetheart would see print. So that's kind of like me. This is parallel because the story. Parallel was me. I think exercising demons in my own soul is a little strong, but like that one was that. I mean, look, that book is not autobiographical necessarily, but like the existential dread that Landon's feeling about time passing and hitting his quarter life crisis, like that was happening to me at my midlife crisis about like, I haven't done this thing that I wanted to do. So that maybe, that's very personal in that way. This one's personal because it's like family names and family history and a time in history that I'm really passionate about. And then this promise that I made to people that I love that are no longer here. Right. So like that's me fulfilling this promise to my family that this is something that's going to exist in the world and I'm going to put in people's hands and hopefully make a difference with. Now, my promise to anybody who wants to check out Jane is, look, it's going to break your heart in spots. It is. It's going to make you stand up and cheer in spots. Okay. And it's just going to hopefully leave you with as intense as it can get, as real as it can feel in a lot of the spots, leave you with this very satisfying, uplifting message about it is okay for you to be you.
So good. Gang, if you're not sold off of that, like just like come on, like just pause the video right now. Click the Kickstarter link.
We can do the same. Like, oh God, this poor guy. He spends every day of the week trying to convince eighth graders that grammar isn't boring. We need to feel sorry for him. Let's go support the Kickstarter. If that works, well then that works, right? Like, or look at him. He's so old, and you need to support indie, right? Like, man, whatever works. But like, honestly, sincerely, it's a passion project in the most sincere way. Just because of what it means to me, even like as an educator, right? Like one of our stretch goals, which is a very reasonably attainable stretch goal, is chunk of my back matter is going to be like lesson plans. It's going to be like a teacher's guide. I'm going to do end notes, like with all the cool Easter eggs and historical references that are made in there that, unless you're like a deep history nerd, might pass over your head, but like, oh, that's a reference to Tuskegee Airmen, and here's your research link and that kind of thing. So
nice. That's so cool. Well, that's something like you always seem like you do that kind of like you have that desire to kind of share. Like, I'm looking at the other copy of Parallel I have.
Yeah, so like all that back matter. So like anybody who's got, yes, I'm gonna hold up your copy's nicer because it's that beautiful gold signature on it. But so like I got to curate all the back matter in that because let's be honest, as comic fans, you and I have both bought and read trades that we probably love, but that back matter is there literally to fluff a page count. And it doesn't offer much anything. Like I've bought those. I haven't even stopped buying those. But like when I got the chance to do this because that sellout, because the Ringo nominations, they let me, they greenlit the SourcePoint Press, greenlit the fact that let's do an expanded, special edition. And there's this really cool, 8-page story diving back between the panels. But like when I got to curate that back matter, even when we did like the annotated script pages and annotated like concept art and stuff, I didn't want it to read, the normal blurb was just like, this is from page 47 inks. Like, if you read what I put in there, it's like the story of, oh, let me tell you, I was on this date with my wife and I sat down on the corner and she kept on walking, didn't even know I had sat down because I needed to write this scene. And that, like, it's what I would want to read. So that's kind of the way I curate that stuff. And the back matter for this will be the same thing. It'll be like deep diving kind of nerd good stuff that you'll dig to read.
Did you, so when you had Jane American, it was a one shot, and then at the end of this one shot it says more coming. Did you know from the get-go you wanted to do that, or was it as you're writing you're like, this kind of works?
No, yeah. The plan was for the whole thing. And so like the one shot coming first, there was the idea on why I did it, which was outside advice. And then, because sometimes, serendipity, fortuitous, whatever, the way it worked out has allowed what we're working on right now to be much more manageable. So, number one, the advice was, because this was going to be my first thing that I start on my own, right? Like the big book it's like in conjunction with a small publisher, but like I self-published that one shot, right? And that was something that originally was going to be a Source Point Press book, but then like their business model changed and they're making a comeback right now. But like it changed, and this was how it had to do it. And people much smarter, much more experienced than me were like, you can't, for your first thing, start with 120 to 140 page graphic novel, because the size of that campaign, like no matter how much success Parallel had, no matter what that brought me as an audience or whatever, it's not enough to sustain a $20,000 to $25,000 first Kickstarter campaign. I don't have that many friends or family to call in those favors. Do you know what I mean? And the audience wasn't there yet. So what you do is almost do like a proof of concept kind of thing. You start with something smaller, and then if it works, you expand it. So that was done out of advice, and we had to decide, where to cut it off and how many pages, and there was work put into that, which kind of lends itself to what we were talking about earlier, like the original running order of the story. Like I plotted out, I had the big beats of 4 main chapters before I even started the script. Like I did the story beats of the entire story, which is what you can go and support now. Like that existed from day one.
Yeah.
And we like rewrote and expanded and contracted and rearranged that to make the one shot work as a story. Okay.
Yep.
And then did that last year. And that was, relatively speaking, so successful. Like 2.25 times funded. Okay. Grassroots campaign, like hooray, there's no corporate backing. I didn't even get, because this is a mystery, I didn't even get the projects we love from Kickstarter, like no help. It was just the blood, sweat, and tears of the creative team. And it gets the point it gets. And this is something that if you go to the website right now and just look at the campaign, this is something I write about. I think I wrote about it in Risks, and then I wrote about it, I think I've got like an author's note in there where I mentioned this. I didn't take a penny from the Jane American one shot. Everybody else involved got paid. Every single penny that we went over the budget to produce it went into defraying the cost of the campaign you're looking at right now. Because I knew no matter what happens, I can't do a $20,000+ campaign, no matter how much I love this book. So basically, when you go there right now, what you notice is it's basically 4 times less than what it should cost. And our goal is $5,500 for a 130-page graphic novel that's got a hardcover and a soft cover and cool enamel pins. That doesn't exist on Kickstarter. And what that translates to, and I want everybody to understand, is that it's not a trick. It's not some kind of ploy. That's how much this means to me in getting it into people's hands. Yeah. Okay. And then the other thing that we did, so especially with floppies, like on a campaign, exclusive cover, big name cover artist. We did that. And then, your price point goes way up. And people even do that for the soft covers and hardcovers. When the reality is, if it gets picked up by a bigger publisher or you put it into shops afterwards, or if it's in previews through Diamond, whatever the next stage is for you, you don't put a soft cover 132 page book on a comic shop shelf for the $60 that you're charging on the Kickstarter. Right now, there might be a couple people who back it because, oh, it's a fancy cover exclusive, whatever, with the supply and demand kind of thing. But it doesn't exist that way in the world afterwards. And so I didn't want to do that either. So, I mean, you can imagine if you're an experienced backer of Kickstarter, that those hardcovers go for 80 to 100, and those soft covers go from like 40 to 60 or whatever. Normal price. Soft cover is going to be 20, hardcover is going to be 40, which is exactly what it'll be on the shelf. Again, not a ploy. I want this book in people's hands. Right. I did the whatever we did before to make it as accessible as we can make it to everybody. Right. Look, I'm a public school teacher. I make almost 12 cents a year. I'm going to be fine. This isn't a money-making scheme on my part. This is a story that obviously personally means a lot to me, but also thematically, this is the teacher in me speaking, like in the same way that the biggest joy of the success of Parallel were the people who, when they read it, said, man, I've been struggling with X.
Mm-hmm.
And I read this and I talked to somebody about it. I went and got professional help. I went and talked to a family member. I went and talked to a friend, and I feel better. Like that was, as much as those Ringo nominations meant to me, as much as I've loved like getting out there and putting the book in people's hands and like the couple of dollars that I made, as wonderful as that was the payoff.
Yeah.
And for this, all I need is that one kid or that one middle-aged person like me who goes, yeah, I was struggling with who I am in the world.
Yeah.
I read it and I feel better, and thank you. That's it. That's what I want. So that's why we priced it the way we did. That's why we're campaigning it the way we did. And then, so like I'm tugging on heartstrings because it's how I feel, but I'm a comic nerd too. So maybe you've already flipped over to the page, maybe you've already seen it, but there's one more thing, and I couldn't resist. So I don't even think you know about this yet, because we're recording this at a time. So for my collector nerds, for my people who need the thing that you can't get anywhere else, okay? As part of this campaign, if you back us at any level, digital up to the retailer bundle or anything in between, you are automatically entered, and the different tiers have more entries. I am going to be giving away one of only 4 slab copies, and the highest graded slab copy of the Donnie Darko foil variant of that first pressing of Parallel. So the exclusive that this came out with, there was only 100. It sold out in, if I'm remembering what Ryan told me correctly, in under 3 hours. We saw a 9.6 of this online last year that went for $300-400. And this is my 9.8 that was gifted to me, and I am going to be giving it away to somebody who backs Jane over the next campaign days.
Wow.
So there's my pitch to my readers. There's my pitch to my parents. There's my pitch to my my kids going through it. Here's my pitch to my fellow comic nerds and collectors out there.
That's so good.
Come and win this beauty.
That's so good. Well, that's the beautiful thing about Kickstarter, like that allows you to do these different things. And one of the things that, and you're talking that I appreciate so often, I know as, yes, I'm doing these interviews, but I'm a fan first. Like that's what drove me to do stuff. That sometimes we can get bogged down with like trying to support Kickstarters, and Kickstarter prices are more expensive than you said than an in-shop price. And then sometimes you back at Kickstarter and then you see it successful and then it's in stores and you're like, well, shoot, I paid $60 for this and now I can get it for $30 in stores. You're going, and then
And
the collector and you go, shoot, I need both versions.
That was the absolute main thinking of not changing the price. You'll rarely, like on a Kickstarter cover, actually have the price stamp on there. And this, it'll just say $20 on the back. It'll just say the hardcover will say $40 on the back, and that's what it is. And that's what it would be in the world. In fact, with, I don't know, like 130 to 138 pages, that can even be like a $22 soft cover to $25 soft cover these days. And it's just gonna be $19.99. Yeah. Just bang. Because again, what's more important to me is that it's accessible to as many people as possible, as opposed to it's not a money-making campaign. It's here's this thing that it's important for me to exist in the world and important for people to read. So let's make it as easy for people as possible.
And if you are not into the collector route, like it is a lot more easy, like say, okay, $19.99 to get a full story that you want. If you're reading, if just a reader, a book is $15 nowadays, when it comes out. And then if you're a comic book reader, a trade, like you said, anywhere from $15 to $20 naturally, depending on size. So this would be like you're finding at Barnes and Noble's, cool, pull it off. This sounds interesting. I want to get it. It's nothing more than, that. So I appreciate that as a reader and as a fan too, because I think that is
you do get the added bonus of a Kickstarter, because you're going to get Kickstarter exclusive covers by comic superstar Sina Grace did the hardcover, and up and coming superstar who's about to cut some pretty big book deals herself, Lauren Nalepa. Like these things, like you're still getting that, but I'm just not going to charge you what we usually do for these things.
So that's fantastic. So real quick, I want to respect your time, but while we're talking, if people can, after this interview, I've already told you, pause it a couple of times, go check out the Kickstarter. Is there and you mentioned some of the things, is there some stuff that we haven't talked about the Kickstarter campaign that you're really excited about besides covers that we've got?
I think so. In almost in the same vein of keeping costs down and making it accessible. Another thing, and this is not, you gotta be careful because I'm not throwing shade at other campaigns, but because of the nature of what this is, I also want to keep it as simple and clean as possible. So there's a lot of stuff to explore on there, right? There's the Meet the Creators thing, and I've got my two editors on this book. One is one of the most in-demand panel moderators in the country / shop owner / writer in her own right / college professor, Dr. Christy Blanche. The other editor on this book is award-winning, best-selling author of young adult books by the name of Randy Pink. Anyway, you got all that normal stuff. One of the frills that I'm really excited about is I am doing Jane American enamel pins, these hand-painted, beautiful enamel pins, and keeping the cost down on those too. But those are something, it's an add-on that you can put on there. And some of the stretch goals are really exciting about, the other bonuses, things that we'll put in the book. Like I told you, all that back matter stuff and the end notes and the teacher's guide and things like that. But really getting into the page and seeing the preview page and Annie's beautiful art and seeing those covers, which hopefully we're linking to here as well. But read the story, get into it and see. It's probably written a little bit more eloquently, if not more succinctly, than I just did right here, on air. But what it means to me and where it comes from and some of the historical research behind it, which is really exciting to me as well.
That's fantastic. That's so good. Well, gang, go support the Kickstarter. If you're not sold, I don't know what else to do, because this was a heck of a conversation talking about the book. But Jason, where can people follow along with you, stay up to date with all you're working on?
Oh, easy peasy. I'm only on Instagram because public school teacher, you try not to make too much of a social media footprint, but at J Douglas Writes. So just the letter J for Jason and then Douglas Writes, and you can't miss me. The avatar, the picture, whatever, is literally me striking a superhero pose in a hospital gown, holding an IV from last year post colon cancer surgery, looking tougher than I actually am. So I'm right there. You follow me there. Chat me up. I'll answer any questions and help you get wherever you need to go, and then posting stuff all the time.
Nice. Well, Jason, thank you so much for taking some time to talk about comics with me. If you're watching this video or if you're listening via podcast, click the links in the description here. Go support this Kickstarter. Go support the campaign. I don't know why you wouldn't, but do it anyways because I told you to.
Well,
So
it was an absolute pleasure to be on. Thank you very much for having me. You are very good at your job, sir. And this is great. It was a great time.
awesome. Thank you. Well, gang, as always, like I said, check the links of the description of the video. Make sure you guys go support, follow along with what Jason's creating. And with that being said, hopefully you can find some time to curl up, grab a book, and nerd out. Peace.